voice of free speech. The truth delivered. Common sense for the American people. Welcome to the Scott Jennings Show.
Tom Homan gets results in Minnesota. We have audio from his press conference coming up. Major medical groups finally admit that mutilating children is a bad idea. And Michigan Senate candidate John James joins us live. It is Wednesday, February 4th. This is the Scott Jennings Show. Common sense for the American people. We are back in the Big Apple today and on the birthday of a man who understood common sense. Ronald Wilson Reagan, born on this day in 1911. Breaking news to start the show, and this just into the Scott Jennings Show. It appears the talks between the United States and Iran that were scheduled for Friday have been canceled. This comes as the United States continues its military buildup in the region. We'll track this story throughout the show. We have other news in Minnesota, where the president's border czar held a press conference this morning. And once again, the man gets results. Tom Homan announced he has secured widespread cooperation from county jails across Minnesota. And as a result, ICE is able to draw down about 700 agents from the state. That is exactly what President Trump wanted, cooperation instead of resistance, and Homan delivered. About 2,000 ICE agents remain in Minnesota, and Tom Homan made clear today that mass deportations will continue. Here's Cut 11.
For those who are not a national security threat or public safety risk, you are not exempt from immigration enforcement actions. If you're in the country illegally, you are not off the table.
Clear, direct, no confusion. Homan delivers. And more polling emerged today backing up the Trump-Homan agenda of mass deportations. Marquette National Survey, 56% of Americans favor deporting all illegal aliens versus 44% who say they do not. Homan also said today he personally asked the Minneapolis police chief to take down those civilian roadblocks that we reported on yesterday. The chief did remove them, but as we told you, nobody was arrested. That prompted a statement from the Police Officers Federation of Minneapolis. These are the men and women who actually wear the badge. They say civilians have no legal authority to stop, detain, question, or search anyone, and that blocking roadways is illegal and dangerous. And when officers try to clear these blockades, they are met with hostility and escalation. Then comes the line from their statement that tells you everything you need to know. Officers enforcing basic traffic and safety laws are not taking sides. They are preventing chaos and potential harm. Preventing chaos. That is the job of the cops. And the Democrats hate it because chaos is no longer something that Democrats fear. Chaos is something they now prefer. Let's stop pretending that any of this is about protest. This is all about power, creating chaos, attacking the police, unleashing political vigilantes, all to force a return to open borders and an end to mass deportations. And that's why, once again, no arrests were made in the blockade fiasco. The Democratic politicians in Minnesota don't want their own agents of chaos to be arrested. But this hostility toward law enforcement isn't confined to Minneapolis. It is national. It is now Democrat Party orthodoxy to demonize ICE, no matter who you are or where you represent. Let me show you. Here's Cut 4.
This description, what you have put forward and what we've seen across this country, ICE is not law enforcement. They're also not immigration enforcement. They are literally Trump's personal paramilitary force turned against civilians, no different than many authoritarian regimes around the world.
That's a sitting Democrat in Congress from Arizona openly attacking the cops. Here's another one, Cut 5.
ICE is uniquely and deeply an American creation. A lot of my colleagues have called ICE the Gestapo, which makes them seem foreign and new. It allows people to say that what we're experiencing right now is in some way unprecedented, but this isn't a new phenomenon. If you just look back throughout our own nation's history, look back to the slave patrols or to racial segregation enforcement, if we look at the decades of run-of-the-mill racism and authoritarianism, what we're seeing is America doing American things.
That's not reform. That's slander. Still not convinced? Here's cut 6.
If you still work for them, that's a decision. And I'm saying, as a governor, I'm going to make a decision that you can't work in the state. I also am calling on every governor, use your emergency powers and take away the driver's licenses of these folks who don't want to wear or don't want to take off their masks.
And finally, here's one for good measure. A member of Congress from New York says people really ought to shoot the police. Cut 19.
But what is really the major problem in this country today is the fascism in our streets. The attacks on American citizens by masked hoodlums. If you were attacked by a masked person, you might think you were being kidnapped. You'd be justified in shooting the person.
A Democrat says, sure, go ahead, shoot the police. Ask yourself something simple. Why are Democrats more committed to demonizing law enforcement than in defending you, law-abiding citizens? And now another clear example from New York City Mayor Zohran Mamdani, who recently made a hospital visit, not to see a police officer, but to see the man who stabbed a police officer with a knife. Here's cut 14.
And as you said, I spoke with the Chakraborty family and I visited Chavez in the hospital. And there is no family should have to endure this kind of pain.
Baba, no! Hey, put the knife down! Put the knife down! Put the knife down! Put the knife down! Put the knife, move! Put the knife down! Put the knife down! Put the knife down!
That audio you heard there, that's the audio, the sound of someone stabbing a police officer with a knife. So a police officer in New York is attacked in the line of duty, and Zohran Mamdani shows up to comfort the attacker. That is your Democratic Party, America, in 2026. They have chosen a side. It is not the police. If you're a cop in America today, simply doing your duty, enforcing the law, this is the message that you receive. For that, you will be threatened, you will be demonized, and if you are attacked, your attacker will be treated as the victim. That's why law enforcement morale is collapsing. That's why some cities are unraveling. That's why chaos keeps winning. The Minneapolis Police Federation said it plainly. Officers, they say, are being scapegoated for doing their jobs. Scapegoated. That's the words of the cops in Minneapolis. The choices in this country are rather stark, aren't they? Order versus anarchy, cops versus chaos, law enforcement versus lawlessness. Now, Republicans still believe something dangerously unfashionable, that laws should be enforced, that police deserve our support, that streets don't belong to angry mobs. But Democrats believe something else, that chaos is an acceptable political tool, that it's a good thing. Ladies and gentlemen, Minneapolis isn't a warning. It is a preview of what's to come. I hope you're ready, America. Democrats are openly for chaos. Republicans right now are openly for the cops. This is the Scott Jennings Show. You're listening to it on Salem. We're broadcasting live today from New York City, and we have one more bit of news for you. This news comes on the topic of aches and pains. We've gone right to the source here. Let me share a story from a man named Rod in Texas. Rod says, I'm 64 years old, and I used to build houses on the side, and years of physical work left me with excruciating back pain that became unbearable. I finally gave Relief Factor a try, and within 4 days, most of the pain subsided. Over the next few weeks, it continued to improve, Rod said. And here's a quote: being pain-free is indescribable. I've seen improvements in the Jennings household, from Relief Factor. My own life is somewhat complicated. I fly all around the country. A lot of wear and tear on old Scott, but Relief Factor protects me. Other members of my family are using it. My dad, Jeff Jennings, he's down in Florida for the winter now. He's going to play lots of golf, pain-free in his retirement, thanks to Relief Factor. If pain has been holding you back, try Relief Factor's 3-week quick start and see how it works for you. Call 1-800-4RELIEF or go to relieffactor.com. Ask yourself a simple question: how would it feel to be out of pain? We might just get the answers from Relief Factor. This is Scott Jennings on Salem. We're going to take a break, but coming up next, major medical organizations have finally abandoned ship on the child mutilation industry known as trans surgeries. You don't want to miss it. Stay with us here on Salem. Welcome back to the Scott Jennings Show. More breaking news for you today, and it is a political earthquake. Two of the most powerful medical institutions in the United States just blew up one of the left's most protected sacred cows. The American Society of Plastic Surgeons and the American Medical Association have now both gone on the record saying the same thing. There is insufficient evidence to justify gender transition surgeries for minors, and these surgeries should generally be deferred to adulthood. That's not conservative media, that's not Republicans, that's not Donald Trump making a social media post. That is the medical establishment finally backing away. The plastic surgeons, 11,000 of them, now warn that chest, genital, and facial surgeries for minors are irreversible and unsupported by solid long-term evidence. And the AMA, for the first time, is saying out loud what trans cult activists spent years trying to suppress, that we don't actually know if any of this helps kids, and we shouldn't be mutilating them while we figure it out. This is a total collapse of a narrative. Now, the AMA is enormous. The AMA, the American Medical Association, was among the leading groups opposing laws trying to restrict gender-affirming surgeries for minors just a few years ago. And the media would regularly cite the AMA to create an impression of expert consensus on this issue. The current shift isn't based on any significant change in the data available. The data really has always been non-existent. This all speaks volumes about how previous recommendations that ruined countless lives were based on politics instead of sound science. And here's the truth that they will not say on cable news. Well, nobody will say it but me. This breaking news does not happen unless Donald Trump wins the election in 2024. It simply does not. For years, American medicine was hijacked by insane political ideology. Doctors were told to mutilate first and ask questions, well, never. Raise concerns and lose your license. You get ostracized from your peer group. Ask for evidence. You get labeled a bigot. This wasn't science. It was intimidation. Trump's victory in 2024 didn't mandate outcomes. It simply ended the reign of fear. It signaled to institutions that, hey, you can speak the truth again. Come out from the shadows. There's nothing to fear anymore from the government that would have previously punished you into oblivion for simply telling the truth. Institutions now know you can follow the data again, and you won't be destroyed for telling the truth. Once that happened, once Trump came back into office and set the agenda on telling the truth, the dam finally burst. Both the AMA and the plastic surgeons now cite systematic reviews, including the Cass review in the United Kingdom, which found the evidence for puberty blockers and hormones in minors to be, quote, remarkably weak. Let me translate for you here. The emperor has no clothes. Now, the left's response to all of this has been frantic. They say, oh, nothing's changed. They say this is consistent with past guidance. That is a lie. When the AMA says the evidence is insufficient and surgeries should generally wait until adulthood, the Overton window didn't just move a few inches. It moved violently. This isn't a ban. This isn't hate. This is medicine rediscovering first the rule that they all are supposed to follow: do no harm. And make no mistake, this moment exposes the scam. They told parents this was settled science. They told America there was consensus, and they smeared anyone who dissented. And now the institutions admit we were experimenting on children. On children. When they write the history of this era on this topic, some folks are going to be remembered, well, less than fondly. Let's put it that way. What they did to children was unconscionable. And you know what? A lot of parents went along with it. So remember this moment when the lie finally cracked, not because activists surrendered, but because reality finally fought back. The revolution of common sense strikes again, folks. But it's not over. Do you know what comes next? Accountability. My view, prosecute and punish the monsters who did this to kids in the first place. Michigan Congressman and candidate for governor John James is with us when we come back. We'll take a break. Don't miss all of the news here on the Scott Jennings Show.
Hey, it's Scott. Listen, when I prep for my CNN debates, I need to know exactly where the national conversation is headed. And it turns out it's helpful to know that in your everyday life as well. And that's why I tried out Free Spoke. Now, it's my go-to place for search and for news. When you use Free Spoke, it's a search platform that gives you the full story. You get information from the left, you get it from the right, you get non-mainstream, you get independent journalists, you get podcast insights. What you get from Free Spoke is the full story all in one place. And here's the thing, when you search on Free Spoke, you know they are not going to sell your data. It's quite something, actually. It's fast, it's private, it's unbiased. Free Spoke helps me research topics and make sure that I understand the full picture. You can have this tool as well. Just go to freespoke.com/Jennings to download their app for free. And as an exclusive for my listeners, use promo code Jennings after you download it and get 35% off the premium version. You go ad-free and you unlock deeper elite tools to have control over your information. So don't rely on incomplete information. Take control of your own information environment. See every perspective so you can think for yourself, just like I do before every debate.
The very definition of never back down. Here's Scott Jennings.
It is Wednesday, February 4th. We're tracking a big political campaign up in Michigan, this one for governor, and one of the candidates is Congressman John James, who currently represents Michigan's 10th congressional district in Washington, but he's trying to take his self statewide in Michigan, and he's standing by. He's going to join us in just a moment for a big interview. First, here is something every parent needs to hear. More kids are being targeted online through gaming platforms, social media, and messaging apps. Big tech is not doing enough to protect them, many people believe. These companies profit from screen time and engagement. And when predators slip through the cracks, families pay the price. Child Help, our partner, Child Help, hears from children every day who were contacted through games and apps, kids who were groomed, manipulated, or threatened by adults who were pretending to be someone else. One boy reached out through Child Help's chat hotline, terrified and ashamed. An adult that he met in an online game was demanding photos and threatening to lie to his parents if he did not comply. Getting in touch with Child Help, though, saved that young man's life. That is why Child Help matters. Your donation supports life-saving programs. Every $27 donation can help save one child from abuse. I donate to Child Help. I believe in Child Help. I know their executives. I have visited their headquarters. I am a proud donor. I encourage you to do the same. If big tech will not protect our kids, we all have to do it. Donate at childhelp.org/Scott or text Child Help to 94878 and donate your $27 today. All right, it's Scott Jennings here on Salem. Big interview today. Congressman John James of Michigan is with us and now candidate for governor. Welcome into the Scott Jennings Show.
Hey, Scott, thanks for having me.
Good to see you, my friend. I want to get your reaction as we start this interview to a clip about the SAVE Act. This is the idea that we need to ensure citizenship and check IDs when people vote. It's not terribly controversial to me, but let's hear from Chuck Schumer. Here's cut 13.
We've got to get this done, and we've got to get it done very quickly. The SAVE Act is an abomination. It's Jim Crow 2.0 across the country. We are going to do everything we can to stop it.
Congressman James, what is your reaction to Chuck Schumer's ridiculous talking point?
Shame on him. Shame on him for his bigotry and for using such an ugly memory for political talking points. Chuck Schumer, especially given his background, should know better than to use things of that nature. I was raised by two parents from the Jim Crow South who escaped horrible racism. People in my family watched their uncles swing from trees. One was lynched in his uniform after getting back home from World War II. Comparing voter ID and election integrity with that is unconscionable. And this is a part of the bigotry you see amongst Democrats talking about Jim Crow like they didn't invent it. This is what you hear from them all the time to justify their clinging to power. Frankly, Black people are capable of getting IDs. Black people are capable of knowing how to work a computer. Black people are capable of excellence, despite what they think. If you don't vote Democrat, you ain't Black. We are not defined by our skin color, and somebody should let Chuck Schumer know this. Election integrity is of utter importance, especially in a state like Michigan, where 16 illegals voted. And you know who admitted that? The current Secretary of State, whose job it is to secure our elections, who's currently overseeing her own election for governor. That's the race I'm running in. We're going to be bringing election integrity. We're going to be bringing back election security, because frankly, the biggest threat to democracy happens to be Democrats in our constitutional republic.
That's Congressman John James of Michigan running for governor. Congressman, in your campaign, you have been promoting something you call the Freedom Agenda to expand opportunities for Michiganders. Tell us, what are the main planks of this Freedom Agenda on which you're running?
Thanks for asking. Well, we're just getting started, but we're leading the way with ethics and transparency. Look, I don't trust a government that doesn't trust me, and you shouldn't either. And so that's where we're starting. We're starting with the truth. We're starting with ethics. And we're going to be driving that, frankly, by leading by example. I'm a West Point graduate, and graduates of West Point and cadets believe that we'll not lie, cheat, steal, nor tolerate those who do. And so making sure that we root out anything that gives the perception of impropriety is where we need to start. The first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to open up my personal finances, just like I do in Congress, to people of the state of Michigan, because it's absolutely essential that the people of the state of Michigan, after 7 years of power-hungry Gretchen Whitmer and Democrats in Lansing, that they know I'm making decisions in their best interest and not my own. We're also going to stop the revolving door of politicians to lobbyists. We're also going to stop family members and spouses and close associates from sticking their hand in the cookie jar. Gretchen Whitmer is spending $20 billion more per year than she spent during COVID. Where is that money going? Do our roads look 25% better? Are our schools 25% better? Is our public safety 25% better? Absolutely not. You have states with lower taxes run by Republican governors that are doing much, much better. We are losing population, and I think it starts by making sure that we have a government that's accountable to the people, having more local control and making sure that we get back to the fundamentals. And that's what I'm going to be focused on, of course, bringing ethics and transparency and building on it from there.
Congressman, your plan also calls for reviewing and correcting mistakes that were made during the COVID era. Tell us, in your opinion, what did we get right and what did we get wrong during the pandemic? And if you were governor and something like that happened again, how would you lead the state of Michigan?
Look, people talk about being Monday morning quarterbacks and hindsight being 2020. That's bullcrap. This is why experience matters. Now is not time for experimentation. I'm a combat veteran. I understand what it takes to make life and death decisions in a split second. Gretchen Whitmer was doing things that I was calling out back years ago. It was going to devastate our state. Devastated our children with our education, with our kids falling down as low as 44th in the entire nation in terms of educational attainment, keeping our seniors in nursing homes getting sick, and many people had to pass away without the benefit of having spouses or family around. When you look at what happened to our businesses, when you look at people who left our state is 49th out of 50 in terms of population growth. And so part of what my plan is, I recognize that we're never going to bring back our loved ones, but we have to do every single thing we can to refund these fines, to expunge these records where patriots and regular Michiganders were just trying to run their barber shop, keep their gym open. I've met with a number of people who feel like they were on the brink and they had to survive. At no point should a government ever, through their tyrannical processes, ever infringe upon the rights of individuals. We're going to be focusing on local control. We're going to go back and make sure that this kind of thing never happens again. And we're going to make it right wherever we can for the people of the state of Michigan.
That voice you're hearing, Congressman John James of Michigan. He's running in the Republican primary for governor in Michigan. Congressman, I want to shift gears to talk about education. There is a federal case in Michigan that is moving forward that has to do with what schools have to tell parents about children who are engaging in trans activity using different pronouns. The case I'm referencing argues that a student changing their name or pronouns without parental notification undermines the authority of parents. What is your general view on this? What should schools be telling parents? Is there ever any situation where a school in Michigan should withhold information from parents when it comes to the health and well-being of their children?
No, and I want everyone to hear me very clearly. Kids cannot consent, and parents have a right to know. And as governor, if anyone gets in the way of the relationship between a parent and a child, you will have to account directly to me and whatever law and authority that I have under my jurisdiction. The good Lord established three relationships. One was a relationship between man and him. Two was a relationship between a man and a woman. And three was a relationship between parents and children. We are endowed our rights by our Creator, not by the government. The government is intended to guarantee these rights, to protect these rights. And then when you have any entity, whether it be big tech or big government, at any level infringing upon those rights, the leaders are duty bound to protect those rights, to protect the people. And there's nothing more sacred than the relationship between a parent and a child. I will absolutely protect that. And as a father of three children myself, a 12-year-old, a 10-year-old, and a 6-year-old, I will absolutely lay across the train tracks for your child as well.
More generally on the issue of education, what are you focusing on as you campaign to improve Michigan schools?
Guys, it's basic. It's really not rocket science. It's actually just reading, writing, and arithmetic. It's focusing on the fundamentals. It's focusing more on academics than activism. It's actually getting back to things that work. Everyone wants to talk about the Mississippi Miracle, but my father left Mississippi for better opportunities, and now within a generation living in Michigan, my children, his grandchildren, may have to leave to find it because people are focusing on all the wrong things. Why are we talking about social emotional learning instead of ABCs? We need to be focusing on the things that will give children the skill sets that they can achieve so they can read. Adult literacy rate in Detroit is 50%, and that directly ties to the fact that 1 in 2 children in Detroit are in poverty. 13% of third graders can read at grade level. Michigan as a whole, 44 out of 50 in terms of literacy and academic attainment. We deserve much, much better. So we're going to be focusing on the fundamentals. We're going to be training our teachers. We're going to be compensating our teachers. We're going to be bringing accountability and competition. And we're going to be getting more resources to the classroom. There are more school districts in the city of Detroit and surrounding areas than there are in the entire state of Florida. The amount of overhead that is being wasted that's not even getting into the classrooms is astronomical. And so just by focusing on the fundamentals, using the same business practices that help make my business successful, and really talking to parents and getting to understand what they need. But this is also big, Scott. This is important. Gretchen Whitmer has not opted into what we passed last year in the One Big Beautiful Bill. These are scholarships that are due for parents. The parents can opt in if a governor opts in. If Gretchen Whitmer does not opt in to these federal scholarships for parents to choose where they will send their child to be safest and most successful, then I will opt into this program day one so you can choose where to send your child.
That's Congressman John James of Michigan. He is running in the Republican primary for governor of Michigan. Gretchen Whitmer is on her way out, and Republicans are trying to take over the beautiful, I was just there the other day. The Capitol there in Michigan is absolutely gorgeous, and we'll see what happens in Michigan this year. Congressman James, thank you for joining us. We're going to take a break. When we come back, a little bit more immigration news that you don't want to miss. Stay with us. It's Scott Jennings on Salem.
The one thing you can count on here on this show, we tell the truth. You can count on it. It's the Scott Jennings Show.
Indeed we do. Thank you for listening to Common Sense for the American People. It is Scott Jennings here with Salem. Rounding out the hour with some news on immigration, a federal judge, stop me if you've heard this one before, has now blocked the Trump administration's move to end temporary protected status, also called TPS, for more than 350,000 Haitians, including many currently living in Ohio. This is another attempt by the courts to stop the administration from doing its most basic job, which is controlling who comes in and out of the United States. Let's remind everyone what TPS actually is. It stands for Temporary Protected Status, emphasis on the temporary. It was granted to Haitians after the 2010 earthquake. That was 16 years ago. At some point, any rational person would say temporary has to mean temporary. Tricia McLaughlin of the Department of Homeland Security made exactly that point yesterday. Here's cut number 2.
I think it's a whole lot of word salad. I think it is a lawless and naked activism from the bench. It looks like we will be bringing this to the Supreme Court. We believe we will be vindicated. Dana, this is a program, temporary protected status, that is designed to be temporary. Haitians were given temporary protected status 15 years ago because of an earthquake. That shouldn't be happening. This can't be de facto amnesty in this program. That's not what it was designed to be.
De facto amnesty, Tricia has it right. And by the way, Tricia McLaughlin will be on this show tomorrow. Make sure you tune in for that. And by the way, this isn't really just a one-off decision. Under President Trump's direction, Kristi Noem has already revoked temporary status for 600,000 Venezuelans, 60,000 Hondurans, Nicaraguans and Nepalese, 160,000 Ukrainians, and thousands of others. What this is about is restoring the rule of law. But like clockwork, here comes the federal judiciary. The judge in this case is Anna C. Reyes of the U.S. District Court in Washington, a Joe Biden appointee, of course. And here is the key part. She didn't block what Trump wants to do here because the law forbids it. The law very clearly allows the president to end temporary protected status. Judge Reyes blocked it because she didn't like the language used by Kristi Noem, who referred to some migrants as leeches and killers, which is true. I'm not exaggerating here. The judge literally cited her personal offense at this language. Then, in the order, she went on to list individual migrants and their jobs as proof that she's right, because apparently that's how we do immigration law now in the United States, based on vibes and feelings. It's not just the judge who is upset, by the way, about all of this temporary protected status business for Haitian. There's a woman in Boston who is very relieved none of these Haitians are being deported. Let's take a listen to her, cut number 1.
and it's really fun having them. What I realized is there's so much prejudice against refugees, mostly because people don't know them.
Lisa says she feels like she has her own personal chef, as Wildande loves cooking. Te gusta?
So a woman in Boston took in a Haitian family and says, boy, I really am glad they're staying. It's like having our own personal chef here. You know, I think there is a word for this. I feel it's on the tip of my tongue. What is the word? Maybe it'll come to me in just a second. It's immigration madness out there, whether it's in Minnesota or on the federal bench right now. There's a bunch of people in this country who are trying to stop the President of the United States from enforcing legitimate immigration law, and they are working overtime to keep millions of people in your country who should not be here. It's Scott Jennings on Salem. We are rounding out the first hour. We've got a great second hour coming up. Before I go, I do want to remind you that we are taking a cruise, and by we, I mean you and me. The unforgettable Gulf of America cruise is coming up in November. It's right after the election. It's going to be me, Mike Gallagher. Gallagher, by the way, plays shirtless pickleball on the Lido deck. You won't want to miss that. Turquoise waters, white sand beaches, incredible food, and insightful conversations about the future of our country. The legend, Mike Gallagher, and I will dive into all the issues shaping America as we all cruise together through these stunning destinations. I would like to see you there. Book your cabin today. Text the word cruise to 94878 or visit scottjenningsshow.com and click on the Gulf of America cruise banner. We're cruising in November. We, you, and me. It's Scott Jennings. We're taking a break. More next hour. Stay with us here on Salem.
The voice of free speech. The truth delivered. Common sense for the American people. Welcome to the Scott Jennings Show.
Okay, it's Wednesday, February 4th. Another hour of the Scott Jennings Show here on Salem. Common sense for the American people. Quick check of the news here before our next interview. The president's border czar, Tom Homan, announced in Minneapolis this morning that he was withdrawing 700 federal agents because of increased cooperation from county jails in the state. Homan made it clear that enforcement priorities are targeted to violent criminals, but he said no illegal alien is off the table and that mass deportations will continue. This just into the Scott Jennings Show. The talks between the United States and Iran that were set for Friday have been canceled. The Iranians only wanted to discuss nuclear issues. They're obviously not serious, so the United States says no talks on Friday. Secretary of State Marco Rubio made a statement earlier today saying that the U.S. was willing to talk, but obviously the Iranians are not as serious. The United States is building up military might in the region. There are sources in the government telling some news outlets that President Trump is now more inclined to do a military strike against Iran. These are unconfirmed, blind quotes in some news articles. We don't have anything hard or specific, but obviously the situation between the United States and Iran is deteriorating. Ryan Wesley Ruth, who was convicted of attempting to assassinate President Donald Trump at his Florida golf course, has been sentenced today to life in prison, I believe, plus 84 months. He'll never see the light of day again. And as much of the country continues to dig out from severe winter weather over the last couple of weeks, we are all taking stock of the U.S. electrical grid and exactly how did we keep the lights and the heat on in this country, which was under a deep freeze. And that is why we have our first guest today. He is the director of the Office of Cybersecurity, Energy Security, and Emergency Response at the Department of Energy. He is a Trump appointee. His name is Alex Fitzsimmons. Alex, welcome into the Scott Jennings Show.
Scott, it's great to be with you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, really glad you were able to hop on with us today. So this winter weather strained the United States and its electrical grid. My understanding is you were one of the people at the Department of Energy who was working feverishly to keep the grid online, to keep it from failing after years of Democratic mismanagement. So my first question, Alex, is How did you do it?
It's a great question, Scott. It's a tough job, but somebody's got to do it. We're firing on all cylinders here in the Trump administration. Winter Storm Fern was an historic storm that impacted more than 200 million Americans across 200 states. First and foremost, we have to thank all of the frontline workers, the linemen, the police, the firefighters who have been working around the clock. Under the leadership of President Trump and Secretary Wright, we've been coordinating closely with the energy sector, who deployed more than 64,000 personnel to rapidly restore power to almost 1 million people who were impacted by the storm. Still work to do. We're surging resources into areas to finish the job. Most of the power outages that were a result of Fern were due to ice falling on power lines that run to people's homes. The bulk power system, the generation and transmission system that's the backbone of our country, that stood up, that held up, and there's a few reasons for that. One of them is that Secretary Wright issued a series of emergency orders over the last year after President Trump declared a national energy emergency on day one of his second term. Those orders prevented the premature retirement of more than 17 gigawatts of reliable dispatchable generation that helped keep the lights on during Winter Storm Fern. Secretary Wright also issued a series of orders to leverage more than 35 gigawatts of backup power at data centers and other large industrial sites to stabilize the grid. And then third, the last point, the most important, is that the most reliable sources of energy that we have showed up when the American people needed the most. 85% of the power that was delivered during Winter Storm Fern came from three sources: natural gas, coal, and nuclear, in that order. Those are the resources that kept the lights on and kept people warm, and those are the common sense policies that you see from the Trump administration.
Alex, I want to focus on that last point you made about the sources of energy that kept the lights on and kept the heat on for millions of Americans. It wasn't solar and it wasn't wind. It was natural gas, coal, and nuclear. Now, the previous administration had downgraded those resources, had shifted focus to these renewables, but the Trump administration and the Department of Energy now, we're focused on fossil fuels. We're focused on things that work. We're focused on things that are dispatchable, and we're focused on things here that are cost efficient. Tell us, if Trump had not been in office, if the previous administration's policies had continued, what would have happened to the electrical grid in the United States?
It's a great question, Scott. The American people were burdened by 4 years of disastrous energy subtraction policies that resulted in skyrocketing electricity costs by 20 to 30% and much more in many areas. And this is simply because they invested in systematically deindustrializing the United States, prematurely retiring the reliable, dispatchable, always-on sources of generation that we need to meet peak demand. The energy system is built to meet peaks in the summer and the winter, as we just saw. If we don't do that, people die. And the grid operators have been warning us for years that resource adequacy and reserve margins have been shrinking because of the disastrous energy subtraction policies of the previous administration. So we have replaced that energy subtraction agenda under President Trump and Secretary Wright's leadership with an agenda that's focused on energy addition and unleashing all of the most affordable, reliable, and secure energy resources that we have. Everything, as I mentioned, from natural gas, coal, nuclear, hydropower, geothermal. This is the resource mix that we need to keep the lights on. As I mentioned, 85% of the electricity across the country during Fern came from those resources. Those were the ones that stepped up to deliver power when people needed it most.
That's Alex Fitzsimmons, a senior executive at the U.S. Department of Energy, a senior appointee of President Trump. Alex, we've been hearing for years about grid reliability problems. How worried should Americans be that we could have blackouts or brownouts? A lot of these warnings and reports that we've seen on this were all written before the rise of AI data centers. Should the average American be saying to themselves, well, we might be in a world where brownouts and blackouts are going to become the norm if certain changes to the grid aren't made?
I think that was certainly the direction we were heading under the previous administration's policies. DOE published a report early last year that said under the direction that we were heading, we were set to lose 100 gigawatts worth of reliable dispatchable generation by 2030. At the same time, we might have to build an additional 100 gigawatts of new generation and supporting infrastructure to accommodate load growth, win the AI race, onshore manufacturing, and restore American competitiveness. That would have resulted in 100 times more power outages for the American people. Not 100% more, 100 times more power outages by 2030. That was the course we're on. We have dramatically reversed course. As I mentioned, Secretary Wright's orders last year alone prevented the premature retirement of 17 gigawatts of power, mostly coal-fired power, that would have otherwise left the bulk power system and would have been unavailable to run. Some of those units, coal plant in Michigan, was operating at 650 megawatts every day during the winter storm, would not have been available to run if the previous administration was allowed to shut down that and other resources like that. And so what we're focused on now, as President Trump has said, is restoring energy dominance. And it's a department that's a three-pronged strategy to stabilize, optimize, and grow the energy system for the American people.
That's Alex Fitzsimmons. He is the director of the Office of Cybersecurity, Energy Security, and Emergency Response at the Department of Energy, and he is working hard to keep your lights on and keep the heater going as we all face this winter weather. Alex, thanks for joining us. We're going to take a break. When we come back, the Super Bowl is coming, and I want to talk about sports gambling. I got a great guest for it. You don't want to miss it. Stay with us here on Salem.
Hey, Scott Jennings here. I want to personally invite you to join me, along with my friend Mike Gallagher, for a powerful week on the Gulf of America cruise, November 14th through November 21st, 2026. That's this year. We'll cruise through crystal blue waters, visit incredible ports like Half Moon Cay and Cozumel, and enjoy the first-class hospitality of a luxury cruise ship. All week long, you'll have time with us. You'll do meet and greets, photo opportunities, Q&A sessions, and the chance to hear behind-the-scenes stories that you can't or won't hear on the air. You'll also be immersed in inspiring keynote speeches and in-depth sessions as we enjoy real connection designed to strengthen your resolve as we mark the 250th anniversary of our great nation. Don't miss this. Sign up today. Look forward to cruising the Caribbean with like-minded people who care deeply about our country. Reserve your cabin today by clicking the link or scanning this QR code.
Ready for more common sense? Here's CNN's senior political commentator, New York Times best-selling author, and America's favorite political pundit, Scott Jennings.
It is Wednesday, February 4th, Common Sense for the American people, and it is Super Bowl week. A record-breaking amount of money is expected to be wagered on Super Bowl Sunday, with the American Gaming Association projecting over $1.76 billion will be legally bet by roughly 67 million American adults on this year's game. Joining me to discuss, Jonathan Cohen is back on the show. He's the author of Losing Big, America's Reckless Bet on Sports Gambling. Jonathan, welcome back to the show. A lot of money will be bet. A lot of money will be lost. What are you seeing out there on the sports gambling front this week?
Well, a lot of money will be lost, not from me, but I will be one of the 67 million Americans placing a bet. I happen to like Kenneth Walker under for rushing yards, in case you're asking.
Got it. All right. Thanks for the tip. Tell us about the nature of gaming this year, the explosion of sports gambling access, and I also want to get in with you a little bit on this prediction markets, because they're kind of encroaching in on the sports gaming market, aren't they?
Right. So on the sports betting front, so this, all folks may remember, was unleashed by a Supreme Court decision now 8 years ago in 2018. And I think we've sort of settled into a bit of a holding pattern, so to speak, where people, half of American men between the ages of 18 through 49 have a DraftKings or a FanDuel account or some other sports betting account. And as you said, the number, we've gone from $5 billion bet on sports per year to $1.76 billion bet on a single weekend, and about $150 billion bet over the course of the year. But not included in that number, in that $1.76 billion bet on the Super Bowl, is prediction markets, which is this relatively new backdoor, basically, semi-legal probably legal, weirdly regulated backdoor that allows people who are, first of all, under the age of 21, and then who live in states that do not have legal licensed sports gambling to bet on sports.
Yeah, these prediction markets, tell us the difference between putting money into a prediction market on the Super Bowl versus just opening up DraftKings or FanDuel or whatever your app happens to be. There is a difference, and there's a dispute right now, right, about whether these things are actually legal in certain places. There's a lot of legal back and forth going on.
Right, and I'm not going to bore folks by recounting all 35 ongoing lawsuits for these companies, but so technically, I mean, really, if you from a user standpoint, there actually isn't as much of a difference as you would think. If you want to bet on Kalshi or Polymarket as being the largest providers on the Super Bowl, really there's some differences on the user interface side, but really functionally it's the same thing. Of course, the companies have to claim that they are investment platforms, not gambling platforms. So they'll, if I wind up with a broken leg tomorrow, it's because I called them gambling, not investing. But they really are just gambling platforms, and there's some differences. Technically, you are gambling against other users rather than gambling against the house, and that is in part how, as you said, they've gotten into this legal question where they claim they are financial platforms. They claim these are investment interests. That you are not buying a sports bet; you are buying an event contract where you are wagering on the outcome, or not wagering. You are investing in the outcome of an event. In this case, it happens to be sports. And that is different, somehow, they claim, from gambling and from betting on sports.
Yeah, you named two of the biggest prediction markets out there, Polymarket and Kalshi. I'm sure many of our listeners have seen commercials for them. I read, by the way, that they are opening dueling free grocery stores in New York City. So we got free grocery stores from the prediction markets before we got them from Mamdani here. What is the angle for these prediction markets and opening up free grocery stores to people in New York?
So, of course, it's a publicity stunt, and it's silly, and it doesn't make any difference, and we shouldn't pay attention to it. But also, to be candid, it sort of speaks to, I think, the sort of childish nature of these companies. I think Polymarket was the first to announce that it was going to sort of launch something like this, and then Kalshi, of course, not to be one-upped, has to announce that it's doing the same thing. And candidly, if you look at their advertising, if you look at the way they're run, if you look at their social media teams, which are in the replies of sort of really small accounts arguing over very small details of how prediction markets work and their legality, these are just not companies that are sort of taking themselves seriously, in my estimation. And so I think that the grocery store thing, yes, of course, it's silly, but it actually is sort of indicative of how juvenile, in many ways, these companies have chosen to behave.
That voice you're hearing today, Jonathan Cohen, author of the book called Losing Big, America's Reckless Bet on Sports Gambling. Jonathan, you've become the official sports gambling correspondent of the Scott Jennings Show, making your second appearance on the topic. We will check back with you after the Super Bowl and as this story continues to unfold throughout the year. We're going to take a break, but when we come back, Oklahoma Senator James Lankford is here. I really want to focus on the news of these medical organizations finally turning against surgery, trans surgery for kids. More on that when we come back here on Salem.
He's the author of the best-selling book, A Revolution of Common Sense. Here's Scott Jennings.
It is Wednesday, February 4th. Common sense for the American people. Scott Jennings is here. We've got a lot of breaking news going on today, and to comment on all of it, my next guest is here from the great state of Oklahoma, a fierce fighter for ending government waste. Welcome, Senator James Lankford, back to the Scott Jennings Show. Thank you for being here, sir.
You bet, Scott. Glad to be able to do it.
All right, let's start with this. I know you've been a big advocate on this topic. What did you think last night and again today when we got the news that the American Society for Plastic Surgeons and the American Medical Association made statements finally admitting that there is no good reason to be putting children through transgender surgeries? This was tectonic news in the medical community. How did it land for you, sir?
Oh, it landed extremely well, and it's a very odd thing when I have to say we finally caught up with Europe. The European physicians have noted this for a long time to say you should not do surgeries to be able to transition the sex of an individual, especially as a minor. We have no idea how it affects that future bone development, their organ, the rest of their lifespan. This is totally experimenting on them as if they're a lab rat to be able to know what to do on this. And so finally, the AMA and the plastic surgeons are finally catching up to where Europe has been for a long time and where basic common sense has been for a long time on it.
There was a lawsuit announced this week. A girl in New York won $2 million in a judgment after suing the people who, I guess, talked her into getting a transgender surgery when she was a minor. Do you think that lawsuit is what forced the hand of the plastic surgeons and the AMA, or do you think this was brewing, or do you think there was something else going on in the background?
You know, it is hard to tell. I would tell you I was with Secretary RFK Jr., Robert F. Kennedy Jr., I don't know, a month ago at the HHS headquarters, where he announced the change in policy that the United States is going to no longer have any funding for any transgender surgeries for minors. And the bigger issue for them was any hospital that performs those surgeries would lose their Medicare and Medicaid funding. I mean, he laid down the marker on it. What I assume is AMA finally woke up to the reality and said, we're going to go ahead and say the quiet part out loud, that there is no medical counsel on this. We have no idea where things go on it. And when people start being held to account, which has happened to several physicians now, to say, you didn't tell me anything about any of the side effects, what would happen. You gave me no counsel. You just immediately went in and started removing parts of my body as if that was nothing. No, those physicians should be held to account. So I think the combination of RFK Jr.'s announcement, HHS, the consequences on the hospitals that do Medicare and Medicaid, and the litigation are all coming to a head now. Quite frankly, it's where the American people have been for a long time.
Yeah, I also think there's one more issue, and that is, I think the medical community, you know, they take their cues from what will happen to them if they do certain things. Under a Biden administration, if they had said any of this, they would have been hammered by the President of the United States himself. Donald Trump wins in 2024, and all of a sudden we all now have permission to engage in common sense, tell the truth, and do things that make sense for the American people. My view is, if Trump hadn't won the election, these statements from the plastic surgeons and the AMA don't come out. You agree with that?
Yeah, I do agree with that, because obviously HHS would have been pushing the new feature that they're going to have for transgender minor surgeries and how they're going to try to fund it even more. The last year of the Biden administration, National Institute for Health spent $250 million doing research on lab rats, mice, and monkeys on trying to develop better, more effective transgender surgery methods and medications. $250 million of our tax dollars were spent during the last year of the Biden administration by NIH on this. All of that has stopped, all of it, based on the Trump administration coming in and saying this is ridiculous. So, yes, I do think that makes a significant difference.
All right, let's move on to Iran. The latest news there is that the talks between the United States and Iran that were to have occurred on Friday have collapsed. They are not going to occur. There are senior government officials telling Reuters and other news outlets that the president is now more inclined to do a military strike against the Iranian regime. What do you think about this breaking news? Is it time for the United States to engage here on behalf of the protesters who are being slaughtered in the streets?
Yeah, it's not just the protesters in the streets that are definitely being slaughtered by this regime. It's the regime threatening every nation around them, and the regime determined that they're going to go back to developing a nuclear weapon. President Trump made it extremely clear that we are not going to allow them to develop a nuclear weapon by putting the massive ordnance penetrators, those bombs, straight down the chimney shaft to be able to set back their program by months to years on it. Iran has turned around and said, nope, we're going to continue to be able to work on it anyway and start the process of rebuilding. The president said, we'll sit down with you, we'll negotiate, we'll talk about ending the nuclear program, what it takes to be able to do that. But if Iran walks away, they know extremely well, we know their address, and we are determined. We are not going to allow the largest nation state in the world that sponsors terrorism to also have a nuclear weapon. That's a very bad recipe for the entire world. We understand full well after 9/11, 2001, when a group says we want to kill Americans and destroy Americans, we take them seriously, and we're not going to allow that to happen again.
It does feel like we are on the brink of military conflict. Yesterday, an F-35 from the USS Abraham Lincoln had to shoot down an Iranian drone. You had Iranian gunships approaching an oil tanker in the Gulf there. Do you feel like it's more likely than not that we are going to see military action here, or are you unsure at the moment?
You know, there's we can always step away from the brink at this point, but we have all the military assets necessary in that region right now to be able to stop the regime from advancing their nuclear weapons. We have naval power, we have air power, we have all the assets in place that we need to be able to defend our allies in the region, as well as to be able to defend our own nation from a future planned attack by Iran. So our beef has been very, very clear. Our problem is not with the Iranian people, it's with the Iranian regime. They are the problem. They are the sponsors of terrorism. They fund the Houthis and Hamas and Hezbollah. They kill their own people. They are the issue on this. And every administration for the last 25 years has said this can't be allowed. President Trump is the only one to actually say, no, we're going to make sure it's not actually allowed for you to advance a nuclear weapon.
Let's talk immigration. This morning, Tom Homan said they're getting some more cooperation from the jails in Minnesota. So he's able to pull out 700 ICE agents. There's still about 2,000 federal law enforcement in Minnesota. And we have this comment just in from the president himself. I want to play it and get your reaction. Cut 21.
Speaking of Minneapolis, what did you learn?
I learned that maybe we can use a little bit of a softer touch, but you still have to be tough. These are criminals. We're dealing with really hard criminals. But look, I've called the people. I've called the governor. I've called the mayor, spoke to them, had great conversations with them, and then I see them ranting and raving out there, literally as though a call wasn't made.
What do you think, Senator Lankford? Softer touch warranted here? What's your view of the administration's positioning on what I think is a nullification crisis going on in Minneapolis right now?
Yeah, so Minneapolis is, as several other sanctuary cities, that they say we do not want the federal government to remove criminal aliens from our streets. That's not where the position is for the American people, nor for the vast majority of the people of Minneapolis, I would assume. They don't want individuals to say we're going to let criminals run free as long as they illegally cross the border first. That makes no rational sense. None of this would have been an issue if ICE would have been allowed to actually pick up criminal aliens in the jails. So Democrats keep saying we don't want roving patrols. Well, roving patrols only happen when we can't pick up these individuals from the jails. If you cut them loose, then ICE has to go find them and to be able to go pick them up. So I do like what Tom Homan is doing here. If we don't need those extra 700 people because we're getting some cooperation from local law enforcement, great. Those 700 agents can move to another community and they can do arrests in that community. We don't have to have more there. But when local law enforcement wasn't helping, wasn't participating, in fact, was blocking them, then we've got to have the agent force that is needed. But we've got local folks to be able to help us. Great. Then federal folks can go do other responsibilities in other areas and continue the work that needs to be done.
That's Senator James Lankford of Oklahoma. Senator, the talk of the town for the Senate right now is the SAVE Act. Oh. And there's also some discussion about what Senator Thune, Leader Thune, plans to do with that and what he plans to do with the filibuster in relation to some of this. What can you tell us? What's the latest word on the SAVE Act, the filibuster, and all the rules here?
Well, we got to get all of our terms here because it's either the SAVE Act or the Save America Act or the Citizenship Accountability Act. There's several versions that are out there now on this. The SAVE Act started with you've got to show proof of citizenship to register, and then there was a comeback to say, well, hold on, let's do the Save America Act. That one is proof of citizenship to register and to vote, that you've got to show a valid ID to be able to vote. There are several versions of that. I am all in. It is already federal law right now that you cannot be illegally present in the United States or a non-citizen of any form. You can't have a visa, whatever it may be, and then vote in federal elections. That's already federal law. But right now the states just say trust but no verify. I don't do trust and no verify. We got to trust and verify on it. In my great state in Oklahoma, we actually verify. Everybody has to have voter ID when they come in, and somehow millions of people are still able to vote on this. So we think it's a pretty straightforward thing to say you've got to be able to have. We've got to know you're a citizen when you register. You've got to be able to show ID when you actually vote. There are multiple versions floating around on this. Let's settle in on what's the key one and then actually get that done. As far as for the filibuster, Democrats, as you remember, they wanted to blow up the filibuster over their version of federalizing elections on it. I opposed that then and said, no, I know what Democrats will do with the filibuster when they ever get power. If there is no filibuster, I know what they'll do. They'll make D.C. a state. They'll make Puerto Rico a state. They'll get rid of all right-to-work laws. They'll go after the Second Amendment. They'll increase transgender surgeries. I mean, you can just, the list goes on and on and on. They'll destroy all the immigration laws that are out there. That's what they're going to do if they lose the filibuster. Those things didn't happen during the first 2 years of the Biden administration because we still had the filibuster. I was part of that Senate minority at that time that was able to block the Democrats from doing all the things that they wanted to do. So I say to people, careful what you wish for. It's always fun to say blow up the filibuster to get what we want, but 10 years from now, 15 years from now, whenever it may be, when Democrats have the majority, I know what they'll do with it, and it is not good for America. And so that's one we need to go slow on to be able to determine what needs to be done.
That's Senator James Lankford. Senator, if you don't mind, I'd like to hold you over through the break because I want to talk to you about some of the federal fumbles or government waste that you have been exposing. Yeah. If you'll give me just a couple of more minutes, we'll talk about it. I do need to give our listeners a quick story from a man named Keith in Washington, an extremely active guy, former college athlete, martial arts instructor, teaching multiple classes a day, but a lot of wear and tear on this guy. His body was breaking down. He tries Relief Factor, and his knee pain disappears, neck pain drops significantly, and he was able to keep training and earn his black belt. We're interviewing and hearing from people all over the country who are seeing results from the drug-free Relief Factor. If you'd like to move easier, stay active, and not let aches and pains control your life, try Relief Factor's 3-week quick start. Call 1-800-4RELIEF or visit relieffactor.com. Let's see if we can get you out of pain. More with Oklahoma Senator James Lankford when we come back. It's Scott Jennings on Salem. Stay with us.
Fighting the left with the best weapon we have, common sense. This is the Scott Jennings Show.
Closing out the hour here on Wednesday, February 4th, I want to remind you again that I'd like to see you on a cruise ship in November. How will I see you? Because I'll be on it. Along with Mike Gallagher, we're going to have the Gulf of America cruise, November 14th through the 21st. Get your cabin. It's a great ship, a great itinerary. We're going to have a lot of fun on the ship. Text the word cruise to 94878. That's cruise to 94878, or go to scottjenningsshow.com and click on the Gulf of America cruise banner. Go on the Gulf of America cruise with Mike Gallagher and Scott Jennings. If you're dreaming of a warm vacation, we can give it to you. Guys, do we have the president, by the way? We do. All right, before we get back to Senator James Lankford, this just into the Scott Jennings Show. We were just discussing the possibility of military strikes on Iran. Let's hear this just in from the president.
Should the supreme leader in Iran be worried right now?
I would say he should be very worried, yeah. He should be. As you know, they're negotiating with us.
I know they are, but the protest...
That's the president talking to NBC News. Back with us is Senator James Lankford of Oklahoma. Senator, during this Super Bowl week, you have been spending some time highlighting some of what you call the worst federal fumbles, also known as government waste. Tell us about this project of the federal fumbles. Give us some of the most egregious examples that you've uncovered.
Yeah, this is my 9th year of doing this. It's a football theme on it because I love football as well. But every year for the last 9 years, we go through and be able to highlight areas of waste so we can expose it and try to get rid of it. It's not just to be able to call it out. We find practical ways to be able to solve and get rid of it. The biggest waste last year was the government shutdown that Democrats did. 43 days, the longest shutdown in history. But everybody says it was no big deal. Actually, we lost $85 billion in waste during that shutdown, $85 billion in that 43-day shutdown. So it was very significant to us. I called out something I mentioned to you earlier on that $250 million was spent by NIH studying transgender surgeries and procedures and medications on mice, rats, and chimpanzees. There was a COVID study on fish to see how COVID affects fish. We sent more money to a Chinese lab so they could test beagles and do testing and experiments on beagle puppies on a Chinese lab. We found an area where we worked with the administration to be able to solve this past year. The VA was actually still sending out medical records to veterans using a CD-ROM. When is the last time you saw a computer that had a CD-ROM on it? No one could even open the medical records they were sending out on it. So we worked with the administration, got that one fixed and changed. And the same thing, we noted that for federal prisons, they could block out cell phone and do cell phone jamming in federal prisons. But if a cell phone got into a state prison, they were not being allowed to jam those and block those. So we work with the administration also to be able to fix that as well. So our focus is to find areas of waste or abuse or areas where the regulatory stuff makes no sense and to be able to fix it, save us money, and have a more common sense government.
Today, Senator, it was announced that Vice President Vance is going to be leading a federal task force looking into waste and corruption, I believe focused on the state of California. We know about the fraud scandals going on in Minnesota. Do you believe that we're going to see just unfathomable amounts of money by the time all this is over with in absolute fraud at the state level, federal money just being wasted, fraud, stolen, etc.? I mean, are we just at the tip of the iceberg here?
We are, but we're already past just the tip of the iceberg. Remember last summer, Republicans in our bill, the Working Families Tax Cut Act, we made a major change in how SNAP funding is done. We had a lot of states say, hey, this is federal dollars, not state dollars, so they don't police it. They don't check for fraud at all. We had some states with a fraud rate as high as 60% in their SNAP program because it's not their money. It's somebody else's money. We changed that and said, you know what? If they've got a fraud rate that's up there, the state has to pay for all that. I think suddenly when the state has to pay rather than the federal taxpayer does, states are going to figure out how to be able to solve fraud. We did the same thing in Medicaid, where we actually prevented people that are not legal in the United States from getting access to Medicaid. That's one of many changes that we had to be able to take on the fraud. So we've already been after this issue of fraud, and we've got a president that's willing to be able to take it on as well.
That voice you're hearing today, Senator James Lankford of Oklahoma. Sir, thank you for joining us. We appreciate your insights as always, and we will have you back soon. We are closing out hour number 2 of the Scott Jennings Show today. The big news, of course, is that the United States talks with Iran have fallen apart, and it seems like military intervention is more likely now than it was a few hours ago. Join us again tomorrow. Scott's out. Thanks for joining us here on Salem.